Good evening. I had the pleasure to co-edit a book with my colleague, Dr. Amanda Wilkerson, entitled From Student to Scholar, Mentoring Underrepresented Scholars in the Academy. This volume contains 14 narratives that shed light on the lived experiences of underrepresented scholars as they transition from doctoral students to university faculty and administration. This book highlights the impact that mentoring had on the development of their voice as well as their scholarship. So today we are joined by three of the book's contributors, Dr. Whitney Watkins, Ms. Natoya Coleman, and Dr. Shelley Samuels. And our conversation today will explore their experiences with mentoring as Black female scholars. So, panelists, thank you for being here with us tonight and welcome. I would like to start off by just asking you to introduce yourself, and to share with our viewers what led you to contribute a chapter to From Student to Scholar.
All right, I'll go first. My name is Dr. Whitney Watkins. I'm from Miami, Florida, born and raised, lived in a few places, and finally ended up at UCF and now back in Miami working at Barry University. I oversee the dual enrollment program here at Barry. A big reason why I wanted to contribute was because mentorship was a big part of my doctoral experience and just throughout all of my scholarly work. And I know a big focus of mine was that I took a more non-traditional track. And so upon finishing my doctoral degree, I didn't go straight into the academy. I pursued student affairs efforts, and really higher education and student affairs was my focus, college student development. But I actually ended up working more closely with high schools and high school students. So it was more non-traditional, and I just wanted to tell that story.
Thank you.
Okay, I will share next. I'm Natoya Coleman, and I actually, as a PhD student at my institution, with my colleague, we were able to learn about the opportunity to contribute to the chapter. And in hearing the call, we felt like our experience as PhD students in a public white institution was unique because we were exposed to a leadership tier that was exclusively Black women. And that experience of being Black female education PhD students with a Black female leadership tier was unique in and of itself. In addition to that, our individual experiences with these women were so unique and special that we felt like this was an opportunity for us to share our experiences in this moment, and also to kind of reflect on the critical learnings that we had from our mentors in that space. So that's really what inspired us to decide to contribute to the book.
Well, thank you. We're so glad that you did. And I look forward to digging into some of those experiences a little bit more as we go. Dr. Samuels, what about you?
Yes, my name is Shalonda Shelley Samuels. I currently am an instructional coach in a K-12 district institution, as well as an adjunct professor. Now, the reason why it was imperative for me to contribute to this book, to this timely book, I must say, is because I took a non-traditional track. So as I completed my terminal degree, I was also a full-time teacher. Right. So it was important for me to share my experiences because, one, I'm a first generation college graduate, much less a terminal degree graduate. Right. So my experiences were quite nuanced compared to friends that I made and colleagues that I made. And so it was important for me to look at what mentorship was. And like we've always discussed, what I expected and what I experienced.
Dr. Wilkerson, what about you? Maybe you can share why you felt it was important and timely for us to edit this book.
Yeah, so unlike Natoya's experience, where she was sort of encapsulated by Black women leadership in her college throughout her doctoral experience. That was the antithesis of mine, even though I'm an HBCU graduate. When I got my terminal degree, I kind of felt a bit lonely because I was like one of the only full-time graduate students in my doctoral program. I aspired, anytime I met anybody, I was like, I want to be president of FAMU. And so it was weird because everyone else was just using it as a way to sort of position themselves within the role that they were currently in and maybe move up the pay scale. So I really wanted to talk about like the importance of mentorship and maybe ways in which I felt I could have been mentored so that I had what I would have gotten into the position that I'm currently in now. Because as I mentioned before, in some of the discussions we had with Dr. Walker, those experiences were like few for me. But as a result of editing this book, what I found out is that all of our experiences in terms of mentoring was quite different, and we all needed mentoring at some point in our professional trajectory. And it made sense to really bring this to the attention of the academy so that we could really address mentoring, I would say, scholars of color. And this now more than ever before is critically important, particularly when we start thinking about this whole idea of what I call the social justice summer, where we've been having movements associated with Black Lives Matter. And one of my questions is, if Black Lives Matter is the clarion call for our country right now, then we need to make sure that they matter in the academy. So I'm happy that we were able to bring together such a large swath of scholars to really talk about mentoring.
Thank you. So let's do just that. Let's take a broad approach with one of our first questions. So I'm interested to know what your expectations of mentoring were before you entered the academy and how those expectations aligned or did not align with your actual experiences.
I can start. I have so many stories, but let's just keep it within the realms of this book.
Let's do it.
Now, the first factor was that I was a full-time doctoral candidate and a full-time teacher. I would say, I'm not sure about you, Natoya. You were in the classroom? Because you're going to...
No, I had a teaching fellowship. So I was a full-time student and I was teaching PhD, undergraduate courses.
Okay. So we've all been teachers. But a few of us have been K-12 teachers, and you know that the K-12 day is consuming. It doesn't end, right? You begin at 7:20, you end, the children leave at 2:20 if you're teaching high school, and then you plan for the rest of the day, right? And you plan throughout the weekend. So I did not get a break from my full-time job. And also my doctoral process was challenging. So in my mind, when I saw PhD candidates or PhD graduates, I had this glorified idea of what they look like, right? I can't wait. I'm going to break the mold in my family. I'm going to do all of this. It's going to be not easy, but it's definitely going to be doable, and I'm going to be fine, right? And I had to work because I needed to finance my well-being, right? So I had to work. It wasn't that I just wanted to work and do it. I needed to work for personal reasons, right? So my thoughts were, I would go in, I would have a mentor that would support me because they knew that I was a teacher. Other individuals were teachers as well. And there would be tons of support for me, tons of professors that would support me, tons of colleagues that I would find. I had this idea in my mind, and that was not the case. So my cohort had 3 Black women in there, 3 Black women of the entire cohort. The first semester, this white professor explained to us that she was there to sift through the students who weren't supposed to be there. That's why they placed her in the part of the program at the beginning of the program versus in the middle or at the end, because she needed to be the one to decide. She was the deciding factor if one student was good enough for the program or not. That led to similar discussions, similar microaggressions amongst myself and the other 2 Black candidates, with grades, with just microaggressive comments that were made. She would highlight oh, I don't like this, I don't think it writes well, when, you know, we had better grades than the white students in the class. We were doing more in the assignments than the other students in the class. And there was no one for me to talk to about it other than the other students experiencing the same thing. And we're all experiencing the same thing. So we don't have anyone to guide us.
It seems like you're saying that you thought you would go in after school and be like energized by the content, energized by the support, and you
Yes.
didn't find that. Instead,
Yes.
what the support you found was with the other people who looked like you in your class.
So that's what, so initially, yes. So yes, in actuality, they supported me because it was good to see
Yeah.
another Black scholar there, but we could support each other emotionally. But in reality, we didn't know a way to mentally and emotionally push through because we didn't have a mentor to help us do it. Someone who was more experienced, someone who could give us ideas, someone who could give us some more outside of ourselves. Because remember, we're all first-time doctoral candidates at this point.
Right.
So that's what I expected. I expected to have someone there, you know, just, you know, an email, a phone call, maybe even a meeting once a month, anything. And so for the first year, we really, really struggled through that program.
Okay.
So my experience was it was similar in that my what I anticipated to encounter is not what I experienced, but I went in actually knowing some of the faculty members at my institution, but being very determined to not allow my experiences with them outside to sort of shape what I experienced on campus, knowing that they would be there as a resource for me, but really just allowing my experiences on campus to be authentic and being open to who could assist me as I was there. And actually, I ended up leaning on faculty members that I didn't know more than the people that I knew. And they were always available to me, but, and I'm talking about scholars of color, professors and things, leaders. They were available to me, but I'm actually grateful that I didn't lean or just run to them, because I'm afraid I may not have benefited as much as I did from the people, from the faculty members that I didn't know. I was able to just, you know, build organic relationships with them. And again, I understand that my scenario is very unique in that it's very rare to have so many Black women first, and then scholars of color secondly, and a PWI available as resources. So, and that's the other thing. I think the power in our chapter is that we provide a picture of what an experience of a scholar of color could be if there's greater representation of scholars of color in higher education. Absolutely. And so while our narrative is not necessarily one that is shared by many, this should be something that we hold highly as what we can look forward to if more scholars of color continue to do the work, continue to, you know, persevere, and doors are open for us to be able to ascend into higher education, because my experience was just very special and unique. I've had mentors in the past, but like I said, I try my best to let every relationship take its own shape and be organic. And I'm also just a self-starter, and, you know, but again, these are nuanced scenarios. So I don't want to trivialize it, right? Because it's important to have mentors, and everyone doesn't have access, just as Dr. Shelley, you just shared, you know, looking and wanting for someone to help you understand and help you navigate, you know. So I sometimes feel guilty even that, you know, my story is one where I feel like I had support, because I know there's so many people out there who don't. But again, like I remind myself that this is the goal, this is the target, this is why volumes like this are necessary, so that people can see what it means to be able to look up and see a scholar of color that you can use as a support.
I think what your comment, as well as Shelley's comment, and many chapters in our book highlight is how it's important to really build a team when you're in academia, and how, you know, one mentor might not be your one-stop shop go-to for everything, but that peers might be your support.
Right.
Other leaders in the college might be role models, someone that you just look to, or they might be an advisor, or they might really be your mentor, but that it's okay to get something from different people.
Right.
So we'll turn to you, Dr. Watkins. How were your expectations different from your experiences?
I'll first say, Natoya, definitely don't ever feel guilty, because I think it's great to be able to tell a story like that, to say I received this particular type of support, because I think if nothing else, that's motivating and inspiring to people who don't have that support. For me, for the longest, I felt so deprived of having a mentor, because through undergrad, through my master's program, I would always hear people say, yeah, my mentor, whether that was someone through their church or someone that mentored them in academia. So I had this very specific idea that a mentor had to be this particular person in this particular role with this particular amount of experience. And so when I got to my doctoral program, I was like, oh, cool. Like, I haven't met a mentor. I haven't found a specific mentor this whole time. Surely I'm going to find a mentor in my doc program. So I went in with that particular mindset. And I thought, given that I would be in doc program and I had friends who had that kind of built-in infrastructure for mentorship. So I'm like, oh, well, my experience is going to be like their experience. But I quickly found that that wasn't the case. I was in the same program as Dr. Wilkerson. She mentioned earlier having that feeling of loneliness. And I found very quickly that if I were going to have mentorship, be mentored by people, it would have to be something that I pursue on my own accord. So it's not like, Whitney, you're going to sit in the classroom and you are going to be, you're going to get a barrage of support from these people that just want to mentor you. No, it's going to be like, if you want mentorship, this is something you're going to have to seek. So that was one thing. And then I realized too, like you said, Dr. Chapman, my mentorship did not come from one specific place. And that was something that I had to learn. That was something I had to relearn with regards to my idea of mentorship. So I had peers, like you said, I had peers who mentored me. I had faculty who were not in my program. And I had a very non-traditional assistantship. So I was in my program full time. And my assistantship was in student affairs. So it wasn't anything academic. I wasn't teaching classes for the School of Education. I worked with a student leadership program. And so a lot of my mentorship too came from individuals who oversaw me in my role in my assistantship. And so it was kind of like I was able to piece out the things that I needed in my role as a student that fed me personally, that fed me academically, that fed me professionally. And I just really had to seek out those opportunities to connect with people. So I learned, my idea of mentorship went from this to this. And it was like, as long as I get a holistic mentoring experience, it coming from one person is not important.
I think also too, like you said, Whitney, we have these preconceived ideas of what a mentor is supposed to look like. So, and I also agree that there was in the beginning, there was a dearth of information or individuals that look like me to make me feel like, yes, these individuals will support me. And it took me the second year to find like-minded individuals that look like me based on the Home Scholar program, and individuals that then became my mentor. I know, for one example, Deshawn, my first year, I was like calling her on the weekend, like in tears, like, what's happening? And her, only being 1 year ahead of me, was able to guide me through my first year, right? Just using the experiences that she's had. And it was the individuals also that I didn't look for, because I'm always looking for scholars of color to support me and to enhance them and to show off. And, because I'm so proud of being a Black woman and being a Black woman in the position where I am and being able to have the opportunity to earn a terminal degree and do something worthwhile with it, right? And so I looked specifically for scholars of color to support me. And that was not always where I got the support that I needed. The support that I needed through my terminal degrees often came from individuals that I didn't even want to look at. Okay, I don't even want to look at this professor. I don't even want to, because you don't look like me. You don't understand what I'm going through. And they happen to be the ones that went above and beyond for me. So I felt a lot of disappointment sometimes. Not only am I lonely, I did find individuals that could support me that look like me, but those individuals, it's like they had their own personal agenda. So I wasn't a main concern, right? Because at the time I didn't contribute to, maybe tenure or their article at the time. I was just, a lonely, confused scholar who did not know the ends of things because one, remember, I was at my job more than half the day. By the time I got to the buildings, offices were closed. And so I'm not blaming anyone for that. I'm just saying these are the experiences that I have that kind of made me understand what a mentor is and what they can be.
One of the things that I think is important because of something that Dr. Shelley just mentioned is that oftentimes I think programs don't think about when they're accepting, let's say, part-time doctoral students and students who will be taking courses at night, that those support services don't look the same when those students are coming to campus. So one of the things that sort of emanated out of the chapters that were written, particularly by the women that we're conversing with tonight, is how they really had to depend on like peer-to-peer mentorship to really make it through their doctoral process. And I think that may be something that, we should put on the table when we're talking about mentoring, how in fact mentoring does look different, but it looks a whole lot different when the system in place where students are going to school and receiving support for their studies is at night, and that's something I didn't consider until she sort of clearly articulated that.
Another thing, Shelley, that you mentioned is just being a Black woman, right? So let's talk about that. How do you think your gender and your ethnicity might have influenced your experiences in higher education? Oh, I know y'all got something to say.
I know these folks wrote, "Lifted while I'm climbing, no Black woman left behind." She talked about her experience.
Yes.
So y'all spit it out because we didn't put it in the book because y'all was shy now. So take a stab at it.
So I can definitely talk about my experiences as a Black female student in PhD program. I had a teaching fellowship. And so one of the things that really stood out to me as I experienced working on campus as an adjunct professor is the resistance that I experienced from my students in the classroom. I did not come to this program as a novice teacher. I had been in the classroom for a long time, and so just the resistance that I experienced, just the types of questions that I received, and, just the discounting of my experiences and questioning the sources that I presented. And so many different levels of resistance that I experienced from my students. Not all of my students. I had some amazing students. So I don't want to, my students to see this being like, Professor Coleman, we loved you, and I loved you too. But just generally, that was a really significant barrier that I did not anticipate. And then I would experience resistance from place when I would go out and do presentations. So just that general resistance of hearing what I had to say as a Black woman. I'm certain that if I were a white male, I would not receive some of the questions that I received or ask for receipts in the way that I was asked to support myself, and it, the demeanor that you have to carry, in order to just bring yourself into a space so that you don't have to, so that you're prepared for that resistance. For me, I'm kind of a mild-mannered person. I'm not naturally one that needs to be ready like that. But I found myself having to have my full armor when I would go into these spaces, and it just is not naturally who I am. And then because of the resistance, I experienced racial battle fatigue like crazy, and just longing for time with sisters, time to just chat and share. Like I couldn't find a hairstylist. There were just so many little nuances of things that just being a Black woman, I just felt like I just the air was sucked away from me, was squandered as I was trying to navigate this space of being a Black woman in a PhD program. But I mean, that I'm grateful for those experiences, but it was really, really hard.
You mentioned armor, and that really resonated with me. I remember teaching a diversity course and being the only Black person, the professor being the only Black person, and talking about issues of many different issues of diversity in the classroom. I think it was particularly challenging with white men. You mentioned armor. I think I had my academic armor, but also the armor of God going into our classrooms, because it is tough.
Seriously.
Natoya talks about the armor, but we in addition to that, we have to think of the imposter syndrome that we experience, and trying to navigate that and trying to focus on work and personal lives. And they always say, when you're going through this process, certain things kind of take the back seat. For some it's family, for some it's friends, for some it's activities. But sometimes you do, like you mentioned, you miss. For that first year, I really missed having someone to just say, okay, because family didn't really understand what it felt like. It was like, you still going to school? What are you going to school for this time? Like, they didn't really understand it. And then having to deal with that at your academic institution, and then me having to deal with that at my workspace, where people are like, you didn't say anything. You graduated. You have a doctorate. How come you didn't say anything? Oh, you want to do this? Oh, you want to do that? Why aren't you saying anything? Can I see what was the program? Just kind of those microaggressive, comments that sometimes I'm like, I'm having to process, how do I respond to these things? And who can I talk to that would understand me? And that doesn't really happen sometimes until I'm able to say, Whitney, let me tell you what happened, right? Or Amanda, let me tell you what happened. And then she might be able to say, okay, here's something that you can do for even personal relief. It may not be that you got to respond to them right away and tell them how you feel, because sometimes I feel it burning in me. I'm like, oh, if you really knew how I felt, okay. But I can talk to say someone like Amanda, and she'll say, okay, here's something I did in my space, and here's something that makes me feel better. And that's someone who's understand being a teacher, being a scholar, right? And then being an educator after being a scholar. What does that look like?
I think that this brings up a very important point that we're all talking about, and it's related to decolonizing the university, right? Because it was a space that was not actually created for the folks that are in this conversation tonight, right? And so why do we have to negotiate our brilliance, our knowledge, our skills, particularly when it comes to, Natoya, I felt you with the student thing, because that was one of the, kind of hiccups as I began my new faculty role, is why am I always having to defend what I'm saying? I had assigned my students a reading from Martin Luther King where he talked about the other America. And in it, he's really just saying, let's consider what other people are experiencing and not use our experiences to shape policy and things that we enact. And they got up in arms. They was just like, well, is he a higher education scholar? And I know that if I had been a white male, that I wouldn't have gotten the same response. But so this is why I think when we talk about mentoring, because so many times people think mentoring through your doctoral process to get you to the dissertation, and it's more than that. It has to be empowering so that it could support us beyond, just those individual experiences. And we have to change the system, I think, in higher education.
So I wanted to give, not really different, but so in my experience as a Black woman in higher ed, and I'll talk specifically while I was in my doc program, I learned just how important it was for me to be pursuing a degree, a doctoral degree. One, so the program I worked for, the student leadership program, was majority white program, or majority white, but not as many Black students particularly. There were a number of students of color, but not a lot of Black students. So when I was in my role as a graduate assistant, whenever I saw a Black student sitting in the student lounge by themselves, I would be like, hey, what's up? What's your name? So it was so important, I felt, to be that representation. And I realized several times thereafter just how important that was. So my dissertation targeted high achieving Black female students. And a portion of my data collection was a focus group, basically. And so the students were in a room and I would ask questions, and just the response I got from them being able to share a space, first to have a space created for them as high achieving Black female students to even be able to talk about their experiences, it made me realize, wow, it's really important that not only I look like how I look and I am who I am, but that I'm studying this particular phenomenon and I'm creating this space for them to be able to share their experiences. So many times throughout my doc program, I was like, wow, it is really, really, really important for me to be doing this. And that was a really big motivation. And then the last thing was, so when I received the Order of Pegasus, which is this prestigious student award, high achieving student award, I thought it was great. I thought it was very admirable, but I had a moment where I realized just how important that was. Once you get the award, your picture is hung in the dean's office of your particular school forever. So my office was hung in the School of Education. And I remember walking into the dean's office one time, and the girl working at the desk was a student, and she was a Black female student. And so she looked at the picture and looked at me, you would think that she had seen a celebrity. And I walked away like, whoa, this is so important to have a Black female on the wall in your school, representing this particular prestigious thing, really means a lot. And then when I graduated in the summer, and I was the only recipient who graduated in the summer. So I was able to be on stage or whatever. And then when I left, I had older Black people coming up to me. Oh, it was so good to see you up there representing. It was so amazing. And it really showed me, despite whatever is experienced along the way that, can be negative, that can be patronizing, it is so important that I do this and that I finish this and that I continue the work. And that was a really big motivation for me, because I think in my doctoral program was when I most realized how important it was for me to be pursuing the work that I did, because it meant a lot to a lot of people.
We need more Black women hanging on the wall. Okay. And I think your comment really spoke to why this matters now. Yeah. So can we conclude by offering a little bit of advice, right? So in hoping that scholars in the future maximize mentoring relationships, and that faculty and administrators move to formalize mentoring practices and not just rely on the goodwill or availability of faculty and leaders, what is a nugget of advice that you can provide for leaders who are looking to establish these programs? Maybe speak to an experience that you had that really spoke to you, that really helped you, or perhaps there's something that you needed and would have made the difference in your outcome.
I know for sure that, especially as a first generation college graduate, I needed my mentoring looks different, for example, than Whitney, who has had the opportunity to see close family members and even parents, go through this process and be successful. So one thing that I would suggest is that there is someone assigned specifically, like Amanda mentioned, for individuals who may not be as well versed. I know that they have scholarships. I know they have different programs out there. I know they're out there for first generation college students. And I think sometimes we forget the doctoral and the PhD candidates, right? We think first generational candidates for a bachelor's, right? Or a master's. And then we kind of forget that, for the rest of us who want to continue to pursue other things. So something that would have been really helpful is just having one person, like Amanda said, in the evening time available for direction, right? To whom do I speak? Who is someone that could guide me? Who is someone I could email or call? Who is someone that I could even meet with? If we even make an appointment, I'll take the time off work to go ahead and meet this individual, because I respect their time. But just targeting those individuals that are non-traditional students, regardless of whatever it is, because of family, because of life, because of whatever it is. having someone or more resources for non-traditional students to help those individuals feel like they're a part of the system, to feel like they're a part of the scholars that are traditional, and to feel like they do have the opportunity to be successful.
Thank you.
For me, I think a big thing would be, so Shelley talked about having a particular person to, support the non-traditional student. I think the mentorship should be weaved into the program itself. I think it would be really beneficial to, so for me, I had an idea of things to pursue after I finish my doc program, but as far as really understanding what this doc degree is going to do for me, or what this doc degree is going to mean when I finish, was not as clear. And so I think it would be beneficial to especially have that type of support for a person of color, because I don't think the trajectory after a doc degree is the same, obviously, for a Black woman as it would be for a white woman. And not to say that all Black women's experiences would be the same, obviously, but having someone who can really give that perspective from a person of color, as far as saying, okay, when I finished my doc degree, I did not get a 5-star job right away. So this may not be the reality of your experience. And having those types of conversations and having those types of mentorship and insightful experiences weaved throughout the program, I think would be important, because I think there's so much emphasis on the academic side and ensuring that you know all of the literature about the law and politics of this particular field, that the mentorship and guidance piece is really undercut, because it's like, thank you for educating me, but now what do I do with this information? How do I apply it? How do I use this to contribute to the field as a whole? And so I think doing that, and then specifically making sure that you have someone to speak from the perspective of people, students of color, to help.
Excellent. Thank you. You're on mute.
Right. Okay.
Got it.
So Shelley talked about non-traditional mentorship and how valuable that was for her. And in our chapter, I was able to co-author with my friend and sister, Isha Price, who's not here, but I'm mentioning her name. We were able to talk about the different types of mentors. So, and we found, as we reflected, that we were able to glean from people in different ways, different leaders at our institution, different Black women in different ways. So one of them was a role model from afar. We would never have direct one-on-one conversation with her, but it was kind of just like, I'm watching you. I see what you're doing. That's what's up, And then we had our advisor who kind of guided us throughout our coursework and even through our conversations for dissertation. We had our supervisor, and then we had each other. And being able to glean from one another, which she always talks about how I resisted her. When I first met her, she tried to link arms with me, and I was just like, I don't really know you like that. Let me have like a semester before we really like link up. And she just, in so many words, she said, no, sis, because you're not going to make it without somebody. So whether you want to or not, we're going to link up. And so I guess my advice to a student would be to be open to non-traditional mentorship relationships. It could come from a classmate, somebody who's walking right alongside you. You could get some valuable information from someone that you never have a conversation with, and that information could change the trajectory of your program. So just be open to that. And then on the inverse, schools, as Whitney shared, should embed opportunities for formal and informal mentorship for their students, creating spaces for those organic mentorship relationships to take place, but also some institutional structures like the Home Scholars Program, or like in my PhD program, every PhD student was assigned a mentor outside of their program specialization.
Wow.
So it gave us insight on another program, another field. And then we were also able to gravitate to the people who were interesting to us, you know, and create our own mentorship relationships. So that would be my suggestion.
My suggestion is really
one last
simple.
thing
Go
I
ahead,
would
Shirley.
say. Oh, sorry. Also, I think we go in looking for the people that look like us sometimes, and I think we have to broaden that scope, right, of individuals. Sometimes there are individuals that want to help us, and we're like resisting because they're saying, "You don't understand. You don't look like me," or "I think you don't understand," right? But I'm sure at one point, at one time in our lives, we're all the minority in certain experiences. And so for me, I had to learn, hey, Whitney isn't the only one that can help you. She can. And she can understand more. She can,
I am.
right. She's the only one that can help you.
Oh, Shirley.
But in addition to her, there's other individuals that may not be in your program, that may not be at your institution, right? That may not be in your program, that may not even be a PhD candidate that can support you with whatever in the different forms. You know, maybe it's emotional support that you need, right? Maybe it's just support with assignments that you need. Those are all different supports. Sometimes you just need to vent and get it out. You need someone to hear. There isn't just one person that, you know, that we need to seek for that. We have to widen the scope and understand that we can get mentors from anywhere. And just make sure it fits us and what we need.
I think for everybody that's viewing this broadcast, one of the recommendations I would have for you is to get the book. The things that they're talking about are going to be very important for your doctoral experience and beyond. And I was completely fascinated by the work that Dr. Samuels did, talking about her experience as a Caribbean woman and her dream to really get an advanced degree. And sometimes when you're in this space, they don't allow you to dream. They want to force you into this harsh reality of what academia can be. And I call it, well, I won't tell you what I call it because I want y'all to get the book. But the other thing is that I think it was important for the work that was shared with Natoya and Miss Price about pulling as we climb. So, and even with Whitney talking about transversing the muddy waters, and she really talked about the non-traditional route that doctoral students can say. What I'm trying to say is my recommendation is there's so much that you can learn from the stories that you will hear, read from. And then there's information and advice from administrators and faculty members on how they can dismantle the system that doesn't appropriately support students with mentoring. And so I think that's critically important for all of us, and continue to watch these videos because we have more exciting information to come.
Thank you, Dr. Wilkerson. I think you provided a great summary for this video. I want to conclude with 8 points that I gleaned from this conversation. I've been taking notes and moderating, so stick with me. 1 is, if you want mentorship, seek it out. 2, recognize that mentors come from many places and be open to non-traditional relationships and glean from different people in different ways. Approach your doctoral program or your time in academia holistically by feeding yourself personally, professionally, and academically. Mentorship does not always come from people who look like you. Consider mentoring practices for part-time students who may attend at night. For those first-generation students, non-traditional students, include them in considerations about mentoring support. To weave mentoring into doctoral programs, including conversations about employment trajectory, and to embed opportunities for both formal and informal mentoring. Thumbs up if I
You did
got
a
it.
great job, Dr. Chapman.
Thank
That
you.
was
That was very
awesome.
encompassing.
Yeah.
That was all from y'all.
Powerful.
There's all from y'all. And more importantly, as Dr. Wilkerson said, there's even more in the book. So thank
Yes.
you for watching, and thank you in advance for supporting our work. And thank y'all for joining the conversation tonight.
Thank you.
For having us.